Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another stream on Shanth Enjeti art. I am working on a piece called the Undead Medley for Book 2 right now. The link to Book 2 is in the description. I hope everybody's doing okay. And just doing some detailing work and thought you guys might enjoy seeing it. This is a very, very complicated piece. Very complicated, very detailed piece. And I've got some fitting horror music playing in the background. Or I should say some scary music. It's maybe not horror music. But it fits the mood right now for this piece. It's interesting. I always get in a Halloween mood in the summer. And it's going to get a little bit chilly tomorrow, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. Because I'm really in that kind of place right now. This is going to be my first horror-themed art collection, so I'm pretty excited about it. It's a genre that I'm really interested in. It's been a huge part of my life since I was a kid. And, you know, Halloween was always my favorite holiday, so... And I know that's, you know, that can be a popular thing to say. And what I mean by that is that it always felt like that one time a year that kind of felt like, I don't know, felt like an amusement park or something to me. It's hard to describe. I was a big fan of the Haunted Mansion and haunted houses, and loved going to Disney World to the Haunted Mansion, loved watching this old TV series or this old TV special they used to play on Halloween called Disney's Halloween Treat, and loved the Headless Horseman short that's in there that Mary Blair did the concept work for. So this is a chance for me to really get into this stuff. So this piece, this one right here called the Undead Medley, this has got zombie references to it, old classic scary movie references to it, and it's just been a ton of fun to paint. So we'll see where it goes. And I'm looking forward to putting it into Book 2. I had scanned it and I thought I was kind of done with it. And now that I've got the book, you know, laid out and all of the pieces in there, I'm going back and giving every single image in the book a little bit of a polish. And I felt like this piece just needed a little bit more detail before it was ready for prime time. I want to make sure this book is fantastic. And I have to say, I'm really proud of all the work. Once I did the layout and had everything in InDesign, and it is very much a one-person show, so I have to do every single step of this, which makes it, you know, a labor of love, but it's a very big project to take on, and it makes it all the more important, each one of these, however many I can do. Every time I put out a book, it's got to be worth the doing, and it's got to be something that I am proud to ship to you guys. So I'm looking forward to getting this in the mail to you guys when I have it all good and sorted, so that you can put your nose to it and see how much detail work I put into it. And so this is a really good example of how crazy things can get. And I just realized where I'm working isn't on frame, so I'm going to see if I can get the type that I'm doing right there on frame. There we go. Let's see if the camera holds its pose now. I've got a pretty crazy setup going right here. And, you know, I mean, I've got the light clamped to my desk, I've got the mic clamped to my desk, and I've got the camera arm clamped to my desk. And so I'm always curious to see which one of those grips starts to slide and move in frame. So hopefully the camera holds up okay. And I'm using Pelican Pan opaque watercolors, white gouache, and ink, but I have to say, mostly on this detailing work, I've just got a really good new synthetic Aquarelle Elite brush for the detail, and I'm pretty much doing this straight opaque watercolor gouache. I don't really feel like ink is the way to go at this point. And I'm just making sure I'm getting my values sorted, because there's this little thing that happens at this text interchange right here, where it goes from dark type on a light background and then switches over to be lighter type on a dark background. So that's the thing I want to make sure that I don't lose when I'm doing this finishing work. So here's an example of what putting in a highlight can do over that ground, and then it starts to bring the type forward. I love hand lettering type. It's a lot of fun, and it gives it that really enjoyable, spooky kind of vibe, and that old movie vibe. I definitely think that a huge part of what excites me when it comes to doing work these days, and when it comes to buying work and looking at stuff, is I want it to feel like it's handmade and not completely pre-processed. And so that's one of the things that I strive to put into my stuff, because that's what I like in other people's work. I don't like it to feel like everything is just so completely off the shelf, for lack of a better way of putting it. So now I can put some dark right in there, because that's on the light part. And then as I move the brush up on this letter, I can fade it out just a bit so that it makes that switch. And then we'll get a little bit more dark there, and then the piece starts to hopefully hold together and make it a little easier to read. I don't mind if it's, a little bit more difficult to read, because sometimes I'll look at artists and I have kind of a hard time reading their type, but if it's elegant enough, I don't really mind. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. It's going to be in an art book where the description is next to it, so I'm not too concerned that people aren't going to know what it's about. It's more of an aesthetic choice to do hand lettering. There we go. Okay, I think that's starting to come together. Now we'll just cut across here. And that starts to come forward. It's amazing what subtle shifts in value can do. There we go. It's okay, I think that's looking all right. Let's see if we can get this to work here. Sometimes it's hard not to smile when I'm doing this. Not just because I enjoy it, because every now and again I get a glimpse of it and I just think, this is completely insane. What am I doing? This is like, why? What led me to this? And it's a love of these movies. So I had never seen Night of the Living Dead outside of clips of it when it was on TV, to be honest. When I was younger, I had never really seen the movie. I'd heard of it, but I had watched movies that were a little bit more up to date. I was born in 1976, so there's certain periods that sort of missed me. So I was growing up on things like Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. I wasn't growing up on Night of the Living Dead. And so I decided, when I found out that it was being remastered, that I was going to wait to see it for the first time when it was remastered. So I got the Criterion release, and I watched it for the first time. And at first, actually, funny enough, I watched the documentary, Birth of the Living Dead, before I watched the movie, because that came out before, and I thought, okay, I got to watch this. And so I was just ready to see that movie when I finally did get a hold of the Blu-ray. And it's just an outstanding film. I mean, it's for all the flaws and faults that Romero sort of sees in the movie, I think he's a little too close to the project. I don't see those. But it was just such a brilliant film. Fell in love with the star of the movie. I think he's just a terrific actor, Dwayne Jones, and wanted to... It's very hard to cast people for an indie film, especially like that one, who have a star's kind of face. And Dwayne Jones is just a movie star. And I couldn't help but wanting to see him, in, a sequel to that film, or, you know, someone with as good of a face to be in a sequel to those movies. And I think that, I don't know, he had a real presence. He made that movie work. The original character, as written in the script, I don't think it would have flown. It was a much less, what's the word I'm looking for? Much less introspective character. And when Dwayne Jones is sort of standing there, you kind of read things into his face because he's just got these very soulful eyes. And, you know, there's certain characters in there, like the young couple, where you don't have that reaction to, and certainly the husband, wife, and daughter, who we don't really see until she becomes a zombie. Spoiler alert, catch up. That was in 1960, 68, I think it was. I'm trying to remember. And, yeah. But we really don't see her, and I think that that's the thing about it that made it interesting, is the mom character has some empathy, certainly. I think that Barbara, obviously, for the little bits that we see her where she's not catatonic, and even the parts where we see her as catatonic, she just has a lot of character to her. And I think that she's, in many ways, the only other human character in that story. I think almost everyone else, whether it was intended or not, or whether it was written that way or not, kind of are audience and cultural ciphers. Dwayne Jones does not fit that mold, and neither does Barbara. And honestly, neither does Barbara's brother, come to think of it. I mean, he doesn't make it very far in the movie, but you get a sense of who he is as a character. Poor Johnny. He doesn't make it very far in that movie. There we go. There we go. That's starting to work. So let me do this. I'm going to move this down just a bit. So some of the more intricate type work is visible. There we go. There we have it. And you start to see how the dimensional quality of it starts to build. Hey, boss, good to see you. I just finished watching your take on The Thing. Saw the Batman shirt. If I've got you on the stream, I have to put you on the spot. As you know from Facebook, you are ageless. So I have to ask, how old were you when Batman 1989 came out? There's a question. That question's from Michael over at The Choice Voice. If you haven't checked out his channel, give him a like, give him a subscribe, give him a follow, whatever the linguistic is. I think it's subscribe. Check out that site. He does some great reviews, and I'm looking forward to what he has to say about Keaton's Batman, although I am 44, or I will be 44 on the 2nd of September. And that movie hit me at an age where it was everything to me. But I know there were a lot of comic book fans and movie fans who kind of were super into that film. I'm too old to say. That's all right. You can leave me hanging. All I gotta know is if you had any of the 1989 Batman T-shirts plastered to yourself back in the day. Hopefully that'll do, because I didn't know anybody who didn't have one of those Batman T-shirts back in the day. The Brian Bolland art ones, I think, is the biggest one, where Batman's got his hand on the belt and then the Joker shaking his hair. I loved that stuff. I just remember it being such a huge part and a huge cultural milestone when that movie came out. Loved Keaton. Loved Keaton as Batman. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Zoom out here. Here's our... Yeah, Night of the Living Dead, the Criterion release of that, is one of my favorite Blu-rays. Just a great film. I really want to see, and I think there's a limited edition release of it, but it's kind of expensive. I'm really thinking about it. But of George Romero's follow-up, and gosh, I've been looking for a remaster of that, but the person who owns the original negative was holding on to it and demanding quite a bit of money for it. And so recently, someone was able to convince him to let them scan it and use it for remastering, as long as they cave to his demands, whatever they were. You can read about it. It's kind of fascinating. But either way, it's great that we're getting the film, and I'm hoping to get that Blu-ray at some point. There we go. Nice. Okay. Let's see what we've got here. So what I'm doing right now, as I mentioned before, is what I'm trying to do is I've got all these different references to genre horror films and classic horror films, from Return of the Living Dead. There's a reference to Alphonse Mucha. There's the zombie one from Night of the Living Dead. There's, oh my gosh, Boris Karloff from The Walking Dead, the film The Walking Dead. And then, of course, we've got Vincent Price right there from Madhouse. And so that's the stuff that I'm really interested in exploring right now with my work. I love classic films, and I was looking over at my wife today, and I said, gosh, I just love old movies so much. I think right now, I just am not feeling a lot of originality coming out of Hollywood. And I just don't feel it as much anymore. And I don't feel a lot of originality coming out of anything. Maybe not even originality is the word. Just something that is interesting or exciting to me. Something quality. I just have not seen a lot. It's kind of disappointing. And so I'm watching. But, you know, the good thing is that we have our old movies. That's why I collect Blu-rays before they change them. Wow. Yeah, I mean, the good old days of the packed movie theater, and, you know, I think that's the interesting thing about it, is that movies like Batman, movies like Star Wars, movies like, even Night of the Living Dead, all of these movies were not events before they came out. They were events when they came out. I mean, yes, people who saw the Star Wars Comic-Con trailer, I've heard the stories, they were really excited, you know, when Star Wars was on its way, and college students who saw some of the early previews and posters that they were sending out trying to promote it. All that stuff was great. But it really was one of those things that kind of hit. And I think it's very much the same way with Batman. I mean, we were all reading comics. It's hard to imagine how big, comparatively big comics were back then to where they are now. And so a lot of us, we'd seen the Adam West Batman, and we had fond memories of that. For some of us growing up, I know for me, I loved watching it. But that was the first Dark Knight we kind of got to see. Absolutely. Oh yeah, you better believe it. This artwork is going to be in the book. Yeah, I'm just putting on the final sort of touches to it because I want it to be detailed, but this was one of the first images that I decided on for the book. I was just saying earlier that I, had been watching Dwayne Jones in Night of the Living Dead, and I saw that movie for the first time on that remaster that Criterion put out, because I wanted to wait to see it remastered because I'd already was so behind on it. And I just kept wanting to see a movie where Dwayne Jones' character doesn't die, spoiler alert. But again, I mean, we're talking about a movie from a while back, so catch up, right? And see him come back and fight zombies, because he actually had a really good plan, for how to go about it and how to get out. It's just those darn kids driving that car. Come on, guys. And I've never seen gas put into a car like that before. And I know they joke about that on the audio commentary, but, come on, man. He's a truck driver, according to the scripts. It's hard to imagine him just pouring gas all over the car. Always cracks me up. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, I felt like that was one of the... that's up there with The Mist for me. That's one of those endings where you think, I felt lied to. I felt betrayed. But the film is so is so poignant, but it was just one of those things to where I think, how do I word it? It's hard to imagine that they could upstage the horror of Johnny being the zombie who pulls Barbara through the door, and they sure did. I mean, oh my goodness. Yeah, when he's... I just remember when I saw it, I was sort of staring at the screen like this. I was like... and then they just roll through those credits, and it's... Oh, that's brutal. It's a brutal flick. But I don't know if... I'm trying to think of an equivalent of that, which is to say, if they had cast the character as written, which is to say, kind of more of a tough guy, I just don't think that sequence would have worked. Every now and again, and Dwayne Jones is an amazing actor. I listened to an audio of one of his last interviews. I think it was from the 80s, but I'm not positive. But he kept slipping into that more sensitive person that he was every now and again in the movie, and I think that's what made it work. Oh, yeah, actually, no, I'm cheap, Let me see here. It's like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was rough. Oh, yeah, I mean, you can't, yeah. You can't, I think that's an ending that was shocking in the sense of, if you did that at the end of a lot of movies, it would have been shocking, if that makes sense. And I think with Night of the Living Dead, you're so invested in these characters, and you're really watching things fall apart slowly. I could think about that movie all day, and it's interesting, because when I look at the things that you do with Starship Valiant, I always think about, just the idea of talented artists and filmmakers getting together and making independent films is so incredibly exciting to me. And I really hope that this period right now, where so much of entertainment is shut down and where there's so much desire for content, we'll get another burst of independent filmmakers. Because we can release stuff on YouTube. It really, Night of the Living Dead, in so many ways, would be easy to do. It's the all we need is an idea. That's the biggest part of it. But I mean, that movie inspires me as an artist. It inspires me as a creator, because I just think, I have ideas for short films, and they're 4 or 5 minutes long every now and again. I'll sit down and go, oh, that would be a really cool thing. It'd be like a boom, boom, But that movie is a long feature film, and it's just incredible. I'm really impressed by, just the happenstance in that movie. The house, the car, the, gosh, I'm blanking on his name. The actor who plays Zombie 1. I completely am forgetting his name. I know he passed away before the Birth of the Living Dead documentary came out, but, his face is so perfect for a zombie. And may he rest in peace. I won't sound... I know he was aware of that, and I know he liked it. That was his character, and that he had such a lasting impression on things. But man, that's some fortuitous casting right there. And I think a lot of the zombies were kind of scary because of the makeup, but he just had a great bone structure. He kind of just looked like a guy. When he first stumbles on the scene, I was aware of what the title of the movie was, and so it's not like I was like, oh, I wonder what this is, but it left you just enough kind of in the dark of what was happening, because he didn't look like he was that much of a zombie. Today we're the special effects and the makeup effects we can go from 0 to 100. Oh my gosh. I will tell you how long I've been working on this piece when you tell me how old you were when you saw Batman. I've worked on this piece. Okay, I won't be that bad about it. I've worked on this piece off and on. Oh gosh. Well, okay, here's what happened. My first original idea for book 1, the one you've got, was the idea was to make a book of horror art because I was really interested in this sort of stuff. So I started working on this piece and another piece called Strigoi Melange. And they're both Art Nouveau inspired. They're both Alphonse Mucha inspired. And then, while they were kind of like in a state of being about 70% done, I want to say, 60, 70% done, all the artwork I did started being Kong and Godzilla and kaiju related and adventure related, and these pieces didn't fit in that book. So I put them on the back burner. And I've kind of kept them in this mostly done state. And to be honest, I could have called them done. But when I was scanning the book in, and you saw some of the more recent pieces, the Queen of Bats and some of the ones that I have on my Instagram now, and I just looked at it and I said, it just needs more value. It needs more shadows. It needs more pop. And so what I started to do, if you can sort of see, let's see if that'll hold, if it'll start to slide. What I started to do is I started to put in those shadow areas to kind of bring the colors out a little bit more. And it's not as shadowed as that makes it look. Let's see if I can tip the light just a little bit. Oh my goodness. Hi, Nightshade. Go to bed. And thank you. I love that boy. He's a very cool boy. Love you, Ace. Get some sleep. But the thing about it is that when I'm looking at this work and when I'm trying to put it together, the thing I'm always thinking about is how can I use that combination of value and color to make the piece kind of pop, to make it kind of come into its own. And so I didn't really have a good answer for this. And my wife is one of those people, who will talk to me about my work, and she'll say things like, the problem isn't color, because she's an artist as well. She'll say to me, see if I can do this without getting a reflection on Dwayne there. She'll say, the problem is not color, the problem is value. And so, there we go. So this is an example of where I had the color in there, but I didn't have the deep value that I needed. And Vincent Price's face right here is a perfect example of where I was able to bring that out. The same thing goes, funny enough, with the gun that he's holding. I just didn't have enough value on it, and it didn't read well. So I'm kind of just going in and putting those richer values in so that what I'm doing with the color stands out just a little bit more. And so, yeah, I've been working on this piece. Oh, gosh. I don't know. If you went into my Instagram, you could probably see it there. I honestly don't know. So it must have been, I think maybe 2018 might have been when I started it, I think. But, you know, who knows at this point. But it's been a long time. It was certainly before I did Art Book 1. I had already worked on it, and then I just put it aside, waiting to do my horror book. So the idea for Book 2, that this is going to be in, and all those other pieces are going to be in, is older than book 1. So this piece it's kind of like a return to what my first idea for the art book was. And of course, once I realized this was going to be my second art book, the idea of rigor more treks, like more treks as opposed to autonomous treks, which was book 1, kind of popped into my head. And that was the fun bit. So yeah, that's where this one comes from. I have so many good self-effacing jokes for myself right now. I felt like putting myself down for a minute there. I'll try to fight it. So here's what value is in terms of how I do this stuff. So there's basically just the lights and darks. So the equivalent for film, like when you're directing, it's you know, where the lights and darks are in the frame. So how it would look if it was a black and white image in a lot of ways. And then the color is sort of another way you can differentiate, or the way color is used is similar to value. It's another way of differentiating the space. So sometimes I differentiate two areas. For example, what's a really good example? If you look at the kind of reddish pink right there and the yellowish green, you can see kind of the difference, but the value, if you squint your eyes, it deprives your color cones of light. You can see that there's a much more subtle value there, and certainly between there and there, but you can still delineate them. The problem is if the value isn't intense enough, it kind of takes away its ability, the color's ability, to deepen the image and make it a little bit more rich. For example, for me, the perfect balance is in Dwayne Jones's face. That face took me forever to figure out. I did Boris Karloff and even Vincent Price, but Boris Karloff took me no time. I feel like I could paint Boris Karloff in my sleep. Because Boris Karloff, interestingly enough, much like myself, I'm half South Asian Indian. And Boris Karloff, I think, both of his parents were, I think, a quarter South Asian Indian, which I didn't know. I think because his original name was William, as you probably know, Michael, was William Henry Pratt. And the reason why they, I think, changed his name to Boris Karloff was to kind of make him seem more Eastern European to explain his darker complexion. So when I look at him, like the deep eyelids and a lot of the stuff, and certainly his daughter, who's as dark as I am, or was, I don't know if she's still alive at this point, but his face is easy because he's got a character quality, and he is a star in that sense. But Dwayne Jones is a movie star face. You know, everything is perfectly balanced. And people who are movie stars, you know, people like Robert Downey Jr. or anyone like that, their faces are harder to paint because you get one thing wrong and they look terrible. So I'm terrified to touch this face, but it's a really good balance of both value and red-green color palette. I think this may be my favorite illustrated portrait I've ever done. The ear is great, the face is great, the eyes, it captures the soulfulness. I'm, of course, working from a black and white movie still, and I'm trying to kind of invent a little bit of color, keep it a little bit black and white. So that's one of my favorites. But here's a really good example where there's not enough value. This little coat that Boris Karloff has got on, this little mad scientist coat. It's not working. And the reason why it's not working is because it just needs a little bit more value. Now, I'm not exactly sure what color I want to do, but I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to move the camera down right there. There's no way that camera's going to hold. Oh, maybe it will. So I'm going to move the camera down there, see if I can get it to focus. Oh, and I just realized you asked me about my camera setup. I have not changed my camera setup. I think I'm just getting better at figuring out how to use it. So my camera is an iPhone. It's just my phone. I turn off, I put it on airplane mode, and then run it straight into my laptop. And because I don't have a fancy camera, I just like it better than all the other cameras I've had, and it autofocuses nicely. I use a bit of software so that I don't get any of the camera marks on it. And I also started plugging it into the first USB port, and before I was plugging it into the second USB port, and I think it was slowing the stream down. So that's another big factor in it that I think has helped. So when I go in and I start to put in some of these wrinkles right here, I can always dial them back and not make them be as drastic, but just those couple of notes start to shape and anchor the value of this outfit into the character. And I think that that's the thing with me is whenever I get a few elements in a piece working, like with this one, sometimes it can be paralyzing. It's like if you're editing a movie down, and you've got this one scene you love, and it's messing up all the other scenes. Yes, yeah, I love to work in black and white. I'm just trying to think if I've done... I don't know if I've got anything kicking around. Oh, I know one. You can look this up. It's probably on my old Blogger account. But I did a black and white illustration of Irish Mickey Ward, and it was for a friend of mine, the gym that I used to go to, I need to get back to, where I was taking boxing, doing boxing sessions with a friend of mine, and he was working the mitts and sort of teaching me how to throw a proper punch. And Irish Mickey Ward did a appearance there, and I got a chance to take a picture with him and meet him. And the cool thing is that I wanted to do a piece of artwork and some prints for him to sign, and so I did this illustration. And that one's all in black and white. And that was really fun to do. I love black and white movies. Although, it's funny, some of the color palettes on those 70s horror movies are stuck in my head right now, and I think you can probably see a little bit of the Hammer horror influence on this one. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to come back up to the face right here. Let's try it just a little bit. And here we go. And so the next bit for me is there's this seam. It's one of those old medical coats. That's what I was going for. I don't know why, but and I'm sure someone's thought of it before because horror is a genre where I feel like so much has been explored. But I love the idea of having one of those medical coats, almost like Henry Frankenstein from the 1931 film, but then he's got this giant revolver. Ooh, that's a good question. Oh, man. Let me think. Oh, boy. How about this one? So I didn't get to color until I was in college, until after I got into... actually, after I got out of college is when I really started to figure it out. And I did comic book artwork, and I was only comfortable in black and white. And as crazy as this is going to sound, I didn't get into color later, but color is way easier for me now. Way easier. I think in color, and I can't believe I didn't understand color for so long. And I think it's just because you get a bad introduction to color, and I had quite a few of those before I met my mentor, Brian Stelfreeze, who is just an amazing... Brian's just an amazing guy, an amazing artist. He's got a couple videos on a YouTube channel on here, but he's just a genius. He did a lot of the redesign stuff for Black Panther, did the longest run of covers for Shadow of the Bat, the Batman series. Just an amazing, amazing artist, and he was my mentor. That's who I thank in the front of the art book. And I had a great, I felt very lucky to have the opportunity to host him up at the college I teach at, and have the students get a chance to meet him. He's just an amazing guy. And so since I've learned color, it's easier for me, but I am working on some black and white stuff because I have been reading some manga. And I think that manga is just an incredible art form, and I'm fascinated by the way that the black and white aspect of it plays in. That's a really good question, I mean, it's interesting. I think the more I learned about color, the harder I realized black and white was. So I think I was working in black and white because it's all I knew. It's almost, I would say that me, when I was using black and white, was like somebody who had a very small vocabulary. The fact that I was using it was not about how effective those words were. They were just the only words I knew. And I think that that's one of the things for me in terms of when I think about my artwork is visual literacy is really empowering. If I were to paint Dwayne Jones, particularly influenced by Night of the Living Dead, all anybody's going to do when they see Dwayne Jones in black and white is go, yeah, that's what he looks like. I mean, he's in a black and white movie that we know him from, and that's what the movie is from. And the fact that he's in color almost kind of moves him into the 1970s a little bit more. And obviously there was color film when that movie was made. But it just ties him into some of the other aesthetics I'm doing here. No, I haven't. No, I haven't seen it. What's your recommendation on it? Your recommendations have been good to me, Michael. I'll tell you that. Let's see here. I think that's working. So yeah, just kind of trying to firm up this coat. Now I've got another value situation that's happening right there where, excuse me, my allergies are terrible today, but where the coat is hitting the hat, and those are too close in value. I mean, without that line, it's really difficult to imagine how readable that would be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this color, a little bit of a darker kind of blue, and I'm going to work into it just a bit in a bigger shape, so it's not going to be linear. And I'm just going to put in that value. There we go. And then bring that up. And then I'm going to do the same thing right there. There we go. God, I need glasses. There we are. I really need to get on that because I hate not being able to see what I'm doing. And I've never had glasses before. I'm kind of looking forward to not straining as much. But it is what it is. There we go. There we go. So that right there, just in those moments, and just in, that conversation about value and how value works, you can see how we just transform that little section of the painting. And in that little section that we've transformed, there's so much more readability now. That hat is coming forward, the character is sitting back in space, and that's really what it's about. I didn't care much for it at first, but it grew on me. Oh, wow. Good gosh. I'm going to tell you this. Manga is so fascinating to me. They write stories that I would never think of someone doing in sequential art. I mean, just that pitch is so engaging. So did someone recommend it to you, or do you just go, shopping and looking for manga out of curiosity? I mean, I usually get most of my manga off of recommendations. I'll have my students will recommend something to me. I actually just got one that I just found out about, which was for someone who's a fan of The Thing. If you're looking to read a manga adaptation, there's a manga adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness, and I just started looking at it, and it's amazing. I just was stunned. It feels like you're watching a movie, and manga does that so well. And I think that's definitely one example where the fact that manga is typically, or almost always, done in black and white, not, all the time, but most of the time done in black and white. I think At the Mountains of Madness benefits from that tremendously. Because, of course, it puts you back in this time period. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, I heard about Castlevania as well, and I haven't seen that one. And I was really into the character of Simon Belmont back in the day when that came out. Because, again, it was that love of Halloween. It was that I was super into, what is it? Vampire Hunter D. I remember when that came out, that first movie, my friends and I were obsessed with it. And I hear that Bloodlust is great. Funny enough, I haven't gotten around to it. I think that's maybe the more popular of the two. But I remember that really crazy scene with the werewolf in the opening of Vampire Hunter D just blowing my mind. And of course, at the time, I'm living in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we're renting that from not even the Blockbuster. It was just some video store that had manga there. That was up on one of the main roads. And, that stuff wasn't exactly easy to come by in Chattanooga. Chattanooga had some science fiction and fantasy stuff when I was coming up, but it wasn't like it was a major city by any stretch. We had to go to Atlanta for that stuff. Let me tell you something. I have listened to there's a version of At the Mountains of Madness, an audiobook. Oh, yeah, see, those are 2 Blu-rays I need to get. I love collecting Blu-rays. And right on, Kevin. See, this is the thing about Vampire Hunter D. And the thing about At the Mountains of Madness, for that matter. At the Mountains of Madness I've listened to the audiobook of that, and there's one on YouTube, a version of it that someone took off of a cassette tape that's really, really good. And I've listened to it a lot, and I've thought, I know Guillermo del Toro wanted to make a movie of it. I know that people say it'd be impossible to film, and I know The Thing is inspired by it. That having been said, the artist who they got for the manga and the way that it was done is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, I can't say enough about it. The backgrounds, the tech, everything is very of the time period, and it just takes you back in time. And I really do think that At the Mountains of Madness, if it is ever done as a film, it has to be done as a period film. I don't think it'll work any other way. It's just, I think The Thing is our At the Mountains of Madness modern version. And I do agree with Michael. They should leave that movie alone and not do a remake or a prequel to it. Personally, that's where my heart's at. I just want to see new stuff. I'm terribly bored with remakes at this point. They're kind of depressing me. I would really like to see. There's a movie that I think I was talking about last stream that's coming out based on a short story called Antlers, and Guillermo del Toro produced it, and I really want to see that movie. It looks really good and really interesting. And I think they just updated the release date, but I will go out to a movie theater to see that flick. I absolutely want to see it. There we go. That's coming together. Yeah, I can't get enough Blu-rays. I'm trying to indoctrinate my children into Blu-ray purchases and not being so heavy on Netflix, because there's something to me, and maybe it's, maybe we're part of a dying breed that way, but there's, well, maybe not with the obsession with changing movies, but I think that there's something about owning a film that and just being able to hold it in my hand that is really profound to me and really powerful. Yeah, I'm kind of in that boat too. Yeah, I'm definitely trying to play it as safe as I can. My wife is a public school teacher, so she has been deemed an essential worker, and so she is going to be going back to work, and I'm going to be working remotely so that we can kind of make it a little bit easier for us to not create a whole bunch of vertices if this thing is, until we get more information on it. And, it's one of those things to where being in a crowded space with people right now, I'm not there yet. I've been to the beach, but I haven't really been out to dinner, and, I'm not sure I'm there on the movie theater yet. But it's funny because my heart goes out to movie theaters because I used to work at one. And when I was a kid growing up in Chattanooga, or at least the suburbs, so Hickson, Tennessee, I used to work at a movie theater in the summers. And, movies were such a huge part of my life. And working in a movie theater, one of the coolest things about that job was that you would get movie posters when they were done with them. You could pick movie posters. So I got the movie poster for some obscure stuff that I loved. One of them was Split Second, starring Rutger Hauer. And it was just this it had my favorite tagline I've ever seen in a movie. It was, he's seen the future, and he needs to kill it, but first he's going to need bigger guns. And, at the time, when I was working at that movie theater, I was a huge Jean-Claude Van Damme fan. And I remember I was working at the movie theater when, when Hard Target came out. And I got the Hard Target poster, which was that arrow the arrow with a reflection of Jean-Claude Van Damme's face in it. And I would just love cleaning up the theater or going in and checking the theater when that was playing. I don't play video games. This is this is the funniest thing. I do not play video games, much to my kids and some of my students' dismay. But when a video game is expressed to me as having cultural significance, and particularly if people rave about it, I do enjoy watching video game playthroughs. So one of my former students worked on a game called Bioshock Infinite. So I've watched, she actually did the concept design for the female character in it. And so I've watched the playthrough of that, but before that I watched the playthrough of Bioshock, because it was just this crazy, The Shining, kind of video game. And there's a video game I want to watch a playthrough of right now that just came out. I forget what it's called, but it's swords and warriors, and it looks really cool to me. And I think it's a game that came out of Japan, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't have the title of it on the... It's crazy. I'm getting it confused with TV shows I'm watching right now. But it looks really good. And, of course, I've been fascinated by the Final Fantasy games. I'll probably end up watching some of your playthroughs at some point, because that's something I enjoy. So if you have a playthrough that you've done that you would recommend, that shows the screen and shows what the game looks like, let me know, because I love to get recommendations for anything visual that's interesting. I think that what's another game? There's a bunch of games that I've watched. I still think my favorite one that I've ever watched playthroughs for, that actually scared me watching it, was Bioshock. Bioshock was crazy. I just loved the art direction. I loved the opening. I loved, it talking about, oligarchies and authoritarian governments, and all that kind of stuff, and and then sort of talking about how Rapture was going to be this sort of paradise, and then having it, just go to pieces. And it was a really great. I even liked the, and I don't know how many people would have noticed this, but I really liked the nods to the Haunted Mansion at Disney World, particularly the Would You Kindly, which is, pretty much right out of the Haunted Mansion. Kindly, take your seat, or kindly, I forget what the thing is, but it just was in the voice and everything. And it did have a theme park ride quality to it, which I rather liked. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you scare easy. Probably not, because you're a big horror movie fan. But I tell you what, jump scares wear on me after a while. I did something really stupid the other day oh my goodness, where there was, I wanted to see a clip of the vampire, the Master, from the Stephen King movie adaptation. I can't believe I'm blanking on this. This is embarrassing. How am I blanking on this? I know that the title is, I just looked at it the other day. I'm having a senior moment right now. It's going to come to me. Shoot. Vampire movie adaptation of a Stephen King book. Character of the Master, looks like Nosferatu. Ugh. Stephen King's Salem's Lot. And that was going to drive me crazy. So, yeah, they definitely do. Played Alien Isolation, it scared the hell out of me. Yeah, Alien, that whole world, if ever there was a world that was there to be turned into a video game, it was Alien. I remember there were those video games that we had in the 80s, and I think it was probably the 90s too. That might have been really where it was from. But there were like the zombie apocalypse ones where you had the guns you had to hold and fire. And I remember there was one that had aliens. It was pretty much the same game. It almost felt like a reskin. And I used to love playing that game. But that stuff, I mean, there's a different aesthetic distance you have. Because you can kind of see the screen and the difference between the screen and the gun. But when you're playing a controller, or playing on a controller, you see the gun and the scene in the same frame. And it just does something to you. It really puts you into that screen. And it's amazing how immersive that can be. And it's interesting to me because I always feel like video games are an art form that has, that even if you create it in the most fundamental way without having to think about it in 3D or anything like that, I think it just immerses you by the way that we perceive reality. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, so here you go. So the Master, I went to look at the scene again where he comes to the prison, and I clicked on it and I looked away for a second, and then I looked back. It was right the scene where he jumps out and screams, and it stopped my heart for a second. Thank God I wasn't, in mid brushstroke or anything on it, because I would have ruined whatever I was working on. Oh my God, was that a good jump scare? It caught me off guard. Whew. That was a rough movie. But there are so many great movies like that. I mean, I could be watching movies, for the next, 4 or 5 years, just catching up on older movies that I've missed, or movies I need to see again. I'm really looking forward to showing my kids, because I feel like they're old enough right now, and they've seen, the stuff they see on Netflix shows like Umbrella Academy and things like that. I mean, my God. I think they're more than ready. But I realized I hadn't really shown them Jaws yet, because I wanted to make sure they were old enough when they watched it. And I think Jaws is just a really special kind of movie. I don't even know what genre it would fall into. I mean, it's not a horror film, and it's not an adventure film, and it's not a drama. It's a little bit of all that stuff, and I'm just really looking forward to showing them that film. I love that movie. And I mean, that's a movie that I realized I haven't watched in a long time, and I certainly hadn't seen the remastered Blu-ray. So I'm hoping that it already looks pretty good, but from the little bits of it I've seen. But I'm really looking forward to showing them that for the first time. I think it's just a great flick. And the same thing goes with movies like Alien and Aliens. Those are going to be fun movies to show the kids. Really creepy, really fun. I'd say you know what I think my biggest obstacle with video games is, unlike YouTube videos and unlike anything else, any other form of entertainment, I can't paint and play the game at the same time. And so I think that's why watching other people do playthroughs is a really good option for me to experience video games, because I can actually have a playthrough going while I'm painting, and that's not something I can do really easily. You know, I've got my teaching, I've got my kids, you know, and the time when I'm here where I can paint is really, it's really kind of all consuming, because it requires so much attention when I'm doing it. And it's a shame, because I do think, in some ways, you know, I do think that I would really enjoy the art form if I got into it. But it's, unfortunately, whenever I see playthroughs, it just inspires me to do paintings. But that's why I think it's really good to have those playthroughs, because for a lot of us, it gives us a really good feel of it. Like, my son loves video games. He's actually done some work for a video game developer that's kind of an open source flight simulator game, and he's designed some planes for it, and he's just doing a great job with that. And he's using a 3D software program that the artist who works on Starship Valiant uses as well. And actually, the artist who just did a 3D CG opening for Thundercats in Blender, actually, let me try that again. The 3D opening of Thundercats that just came out was done in Blender. And that's a really great, I think that guy did a really great job, and it's a really great advertisement for what that software is capable of, if all the other things that have come out weren't already a really good example of what it can do. Okay, so I've got that. And I just realized, like, I am not painting on screen. Yeah, my son, absolutely. That kid's crazy. I love him. He's a machine, you know. But they've both got their qualities. But yeah, very proud of him. He's a good kid, and gets it done. And I think that's the thing for me is that I never realized. Well, actually, that's probably not true. I probably did realize, but how important other artists are to me. And, you know, other artists give me so much inspiration, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on films, whether it's audiobooks, whether it's long-form conversation, podcasts. That stuff fuels my work so much, and it's so important. Oh, God, I love Thundercats, period. Love Thundercats. So I live near where Hasbro is located. And I was talking about, and I was like a hardcore Thundercats fan. I thought the Thunder Tank was one of the coolest things ever designed. I thought that the, what do you call it, Lionel, his glove and his sword, the way that it came together, don't even get me started. I loved that stuff. It's one of the characters I don't have represented in my little shrine over here, which I'm going to get the camera in frame for a little bit. But you can see the Crow, you can see Blade, probably not very well. You can see Hellboy. You can see all these other characters. Hulk, King Kong, Godzilla, the whole 9 yards. And let me see if I can turn that. There we go. And one of the characters who's not represented there is Lionel from Thundercats, because that was a huge favorite for me. But one of the people that I've met who's worked in the toy industry, I was telling him how obsessed I was with, even though it was kind of late in the run, how obsessed I was with the Berserkers. And I loved, for whatever reason, the color scheme and the design of the character Top Spinner. And he was like, yeah, I designed that character. And I was just, oh my God, what a cool thing to see. Oh, nice. I'm hoping they do too. I don't know what would be involved in the remastering, and I haven't seen the Blu-rays. I've bought it on iTunes. So I've bought the episodes. And when I saw that, you know, I think you've talked about it a little bit, but I really think there's enough there that they don't need to ever reinvent the Thundercats. I think they just work so well for what they are. Let me see if I can get this to not collapse. There we go. I think they work so well for what they are, and I don't want to see them I just don't want to see them changed because it doesn't even make any sense. Like some things are classics, and I'm not even talking about the whatever the Thundercats roar thing was or any of that other stuff. That I don't think any of that stuff really takes away from Thundercats to me because I just have no interest in it. So it's not my thing. But for me, that show was so great, and the voice actors were so great, and it just had this kind of magic of that time. And I like when people work in a genre work or a work with a big cult following, and they're able to successfully lean in to some of the more absurd elements without it being mockery or without it being cynical or having a kind of disingenuous quality to it. And I think that's what makes doing genre work so hard. I wouldn't want to ever be in a situation where I had to make something like Lord of the Rings because I just think it's so complicated. Same thing goes with Star Trek, for that matter. I mean, there's a sincerity. There's this overarching sincerity that if you don't have it, the whole thing falls apart. And the characters and the actors have to really believe in Starfleet and have to really believe in the goodness of this thing in a non-cynical way, and in almost, without a doubt, an enlightened way. Almost like, a Gandhi or Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela kind of way. It's a really powerful thing. And, cynicism just has no place there. And I think sometimes I think it's very difficult for people who, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, but I think sincerity comes not from an ignorance about how dark things can be, but a realization of the importance and the value of the light. And I will never understand not seeing the value in that, in great storytelling. I think some of these works and these icons we've created are more important than people understand. And I think it's a shame when people work on some of these iconic properties who don't understand them. And it is what it is. I mean, that's its own reward for the people who own the rights to them. It just seems to kill them. But I think that so a property like Thundercats is so I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is. It's so unabashedly enthusiastic, optimistic, and the educational aspect of it. And I just think that it's a shame that we don't have, that we have so many great stories and so many great myths that we should be passing on, and we kind of are just showing the name of it and showing, the brand of it, but we're not really bringing the stuff that to me is of real value and moving that forward. Like the zombie genre is a really good example. I love movies like Shaun of the Dead. I think they're great, and I think they're worthy entries into that genre because they actually are saying something, in that case, kind of about a wink and a nod at Gen X. But I think that, that genre was born with Night of the Living Dead, and that is a high bar, and it's so many more things. First and foremost, it's a classic, but it's so much more than just a zombie film. The art style is beautiful. Yeah, the opening sequence, the drawing in that is great. The broken lines, the way things move. Yeah, I will. I mean, that's masterful. Masterful for television animation. I mean, where the budget would slow, things down or would fall short, the imagination on that show never fell short. It was really a great show. And there was every single character, every single interpretation was so strong and so interesting. They really created this convincing alien world that had its own, what Kurosawa would say, its own immaculate reality. You just you sank into it, you believed it. And that is so hard to achieve. It's so hard to achieve when it's on a level like that. Me and my kids were watching the Harry Potter films the other day, and I was looking at the Universal Studios Harry Potter world, and that world is so convincing. And I think the same thing could be said, obviously, for Star Wars, certainly for the George Lucas Star Wars movies. And I think, the Marvel Universe has that too. The flying aircraft carrier, which I can't believe, the Flying Fortress, is just, it was done so well, it was realized so well in the films, but that immaculate reality is definitely something that the Marvel Universe has created, and I really admire when I see it in films. It just has its own reality. Thundercats is just great in that way. A real classic. Okay, I think this is sort of coming together here. There we go. Gosh, this is a complicated piece. I had no idea when I started this piece how nuts it was going to get. But I think it's almost there. I think it's almost done. Just a couple more things on the lettering and a couple of more elements. Actually, I should grab that before I split, because it'll be some good context for this. There we go. So this is I think this is the first of the two. This is Strigoi Melange, and there are a lot more likenesses. There's a take on Guillermo del Toro's The Strain, which I thought had a really great first season. The other seasons are all right, but I think that first season was great, and I wish it had kind of continued in that line a little bit more, but I really thought the character designs were great and were really interesting, and I wanted to do a take on it, kind of like a what if it was happening during the time of classic movies. So I put Nosferatu in there, and put Ilsa Lancaster in there, and I put Lon Chaney Sr. in there in the back, and then some Alphonse Mucha references. And this is also going to be in book 2, coming to you soon. And then I wanted to look up for the not Boris Karloff. Why do I keep saying that? Bela Lugosi character. For the Bela Lugosi character, I wanted to come up with some kind of pet for him. I don't know why. So I looked up this bird, or this falcon, that's from the Transylvania area, that has this kind of orange-blue quality to it. And of course I was referencing things like the armadillos that are running around in the castle in the 1931 Dracula. So I like the idea of these kind of, almost like at the Mountains of Madness, instead of albino penguins, I wanted to have these giant albino armadillos. And in Nosferatu, I think it was, where they have wolves running around, they actually have hyenas running around. And they're saying they're Transylvanian wolves. And I thought, I'm going to take all of the craziness from all of those movies that I love, one of them being, of course, the hyenas from Nosferatu, and the armadillos from the 1931 Dracula. And so this book is going to be so fun. I did do a Stranger Things piece that is somewhere back in my Instagram, way at the beginning. I did a Stranger Things sketch, and it was just a small watercolor sketch of the Demogorgon. And I have to say, I think for all the people who've tried to do Stephen King and Spielberg, I think Stranger Things did by far the best job with that. And I really loved that show. I loved that series. And I still think the first season is perfect. And I like the other seasons. I think they're enjoyable. My wife is looking forward to showing our kids Stranger Things because they haven't seen it yet. And I really can't wait to show it to them. But yeah, I loved the first season. I really liked the first and second season a lot. The third season, I actually thought they did a really good job with. It's a tough time in the characters' lives, but it's such an inventive and interesting world. I really like it. It's particularly the whole mind flayer, Lovecraftian quality they started to bring to it. I thought was really nice. Sorry, this piece is insane. I keep looking at it and thinking, what did I get myself into? But you know what? For the people who back this book, it's crazy, and I should say my wife will kill me. The link is in the description. I always forget to say that. But it's so worth it because I just think we're all in need of something that's inspiring and imaginative. And I really hope for the people who back this book, every single copy I'm going to be putting in the mail, and I'm going to be signing every single copy. I want it to be something that kind of inspires them and gives them a feeling of inspiration when they get it. But yeah, this piece is definitely like practically a magnum opus for me. It's just nuts. It's just so detailed, and it's just requires almost everything I have to get to work. Nice. Yeah, I mean, what's so funny is that and I think you've watched this one as well, but for me, Netflix has really done most of the stuff that I found interesting. So Stranger Things I found really interesting, and The Witcher I found really interesting. I kind of like the world they were creating there. So, I'm a big fan of... I'm trying to think, there was another show, and I'm blanking on it, because there's a couple shows, but those two stand out for me as really good Netflix shows. I mean, Stranger Things became practically an event show, which I thought was amazing. But there's some things that I don't know, maybe it was just me, but there's some things about the 80s I think that the creators... I mean, I guess you could argue that these kids are, there were people with different opinions. But when they were dressing up as the Ghostbusters for Halloween, I had to explain to my wife, because she wasn't the biggest Ghostbusters fan, but I was a massive Ghostbusters fan. I have one of the terror dogs over in the drawer over there. Yeah, I know. I'm curious to see how season 4 goes. But none of the kids wanted to be Winston, and for anybody who has not seen that movie, that drove me completely crazy, because the character that we quoted, my friends and I, when I was growing up in Tennessee, we quoted the most was Winston. We'd always look at each other and say, if someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes, and then the line, that's a big Twinkie. We said that constantly. And so I just was really annoyed by that. I was like, come on. Everybody wanted to be Winston, but what are you going to do? He was to me, he was the sanest character in that story. But then I like Ernie Hudson. He's in The Crow with the late Brandon Lee, who's one of my childhood heroes. So Ernie Hudson is gold to me for that. Brandon Lee is just one of those people that's very, very important to me. I talked to my wife still hasn't seen the movie The Crow yet, and I'm sort of saving that for a rainy day, because what a tragic loss that was. There we go. What's really interesting? Okay, so I liked the early bits of Game of Thrones, but at a certain point, for me, there's just certain kinds of things that certain kinds of violence and other stuff that just kind of wears on me after a while, certain kinds of torture. And after a while, as interesting as it was, it's not that... How do I word it? I can pretty much handle almost anything in terms of narrative, but after a while, those kinds of things can just sort of burn me down. And so I watched and I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. I'd say The Witcher is equally as, as violent in some ways, but there was just, at certain points, I felt like the lack of levity was a bit much for me. It doesn't mean I didn't think it was good. It just means that the lack of levity with some of the violence, like I enjoyed Peter Dinklage. I think that Peter Dinklage is the Toshiro Mifune of his generation as an actor. Mifune in Seven Samurai or Throne of Blood, he has that kind of lightning quick ability to turn on a dime in terms of his emotions and get them out there. So I love Peter Dinklage in that. But I just sort of felt like at a certain point that, I felt like some of the nihilistic quality of it was tedious. And what's kind of interesting is, from what I've heard from fans of the show, is that was ultimately what kind of burned people out about the way that the show ended, that it just, everybody got kind of taken out, apparently. And that was the thing that from the off, like, I got the idea of the Red Wedding, like, I get the narrative aspect of those kinds of things. But I just, after a certain while, I'm like, yep. So, I liked the production design on it. I thought it was interesting, so don't get me wrong. But I wasn't taken over by it. Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah, I thought that. Although you know what's so funny is that about The Witcher that I found kind of fascinating is that was just the whole aspect of the guy being a big video game fan. I mean that was kind of amazing to me. It's like you have this guy who is this action star, but he really gets and respects the character. And I think that while I would have liked to have seen, I don't know, it's tough to say. While I totally I get that aspect of it. The other aspect is he felt a little bit like, for someone who does not know The Witcher and has not played the games, admittedly, so I'm hardly the authority, on The Witcher. But, oh, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. And, but for me, it kind of gave him this kind of the man with no name quality, where I felt like a lot was being revealed about him in terms of certain things, but the fact that his screen time wasn't there kind of maybe gave it more resonance. So, I mean, I can see it from both sides, to be honest with you. I really can. And, to me, anytime, and this is the funny thing, and that's the thing, when someone who's a fan of the games, and there's another YouTuber I follow who's a big fan of The Witcher and big fan of those games. He has, like, third scale or quarter scale statues of them, like I have of the Hulk. And when it comes to things like that, I'm always going to sort of defer to the fans of it. I mean, if somebody who doesn't, like, I'm just going to grab a random example. If somebody who doesn't care about Guillermo del Toro movies, let's say, or Todd McFarlane comics or something like that, comes up to me and says, well, I don't really like those, but I think this thing is good, and it's I might have an opinion on. Now, I'm not gonna, like most of us, I'm not gonna go off the rails about it, but I think that there's something special about people who have a deep understanding of something and a really deep connection in terms of what fandom has. And since I don't play video games, and since that game is so significant to so many, not to mention the books, I have listened to the audiobooks. I started listening to the audiobooks, and they're fantastic. Really loved those books. I was kind of stunned by how wonderfully pulpy they were. And but I don't play the video games, and I think the video games are really what made The Witcher the pop culture phenomenon it is. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming Michael, have you played the video games, The Witcher video games? Because that's where I've heard is the most epic lore associated with The Witcher. And by the way, if that's the case, I'm curious what you made of Henry Cavill as The Witcher, if you thought he was a good fit. Because I've heard mixed things, but I'd be curious to know what you think. And Kevin, by the way, if you have a Witcher thought, throw in there too, because I know you play video games as well. Or I think you do. I can remember you saying that, but who knows? My memory might not be that great. Here we go. Let's see here. And here we are. Put a little bit of that through there. Just give it a little bit of a highlight that blends in the shadow right there. So it delineates from that dark in the ground, and then it kind of comes forward a bit. I still think I might need to adjust the value a little bit darker on Dwayne Jones's shirt. I actually worked on that portrait of Dwayne Jones while I was listening to his last interview that he gave in the 80s, and really got a sense of the man. And I that may sound kind of, I don't know, a little new agey or something there, but I really did find it helped me to capture something of the character. Just because I didn't really want to paint. Gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on his character's name. Shoot. And I know his name, and it's another one of those things where my brain is just going, but I didn't want to paint his character and he talked about that in the interview. He said the character really didn't have much to him. I mean, where was he going? You know, what was he about? I mean, he was just there. And I think Dwayne Jones, I wanted to kind of capture some of that sensitivity he has as an actor and as a teacher. Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Well, if you do play it, I would love to hear your thoughts on it, because I think it's the second game, is it? Witcher, the sequel game, people swear by and say it's great. Maybe I'll watch a playthrough of that at some point so I can get a better grasp of it. Because clearly it's a huge phenomenon, and it's a really important work, culturally speaking, because the books have done well, and from my experience with the books, I find them highly enjoyable, highly readable. And then there's the, the show being a success, and it just seems to me like, much like Game of Thrones, you know, the success of Game of Thrones, you know, and that was just my personal take on the show, it's affected so many people. The books are such a huge part of a lot of my friends who read fantasy novels. It's a huge part of their cultural touchstone. And, yeah, that should be a Patreon playthrough. Yeah, absolutely. And you know me, I'm all in on Patreon. I'm a big fan of your Patreon. That's just the way it is. I always get annoyed when I'm busy with the kids or I'm working on stuff and I don't get a chance to check it out when something new comes out. But I'm a very, very happy backer of your Patreon. Let that be known. But I think that stuff like Game of Thrones and The Witcher have their place in pop culture, and it's important to kind of be aware of them and you know, to look into them a little bit more deeply. So that's what I try to do. Nice. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I could tell that when I was watching it that he was, you know, clearly, you know, he had a voice for the character, and I kind of assumed it was from the game, but I haven't played the game, so I didn't really know. But that clarifies that for me. But yeah, I mean, I think fantasy is so hard to do. I was talking to my wife about it, and I'm trying to think if she enjoys fantasy stuff. I don't know that she really is the biggest fantasy fan. She is a hardcore Star Trek fan, hardcore science fiction fan. Fantasy, I don't know if that's her thing, but I always tell her, I go, designing and doing fantasy in live action is one of the hardest things in the world to do, because it very quickly gets silly if you're not careful. And that's why I think Weta did such an amazing job with the Lord of the Rings films, because for the fans of those books and for the people who are huge fans of it, they really created a beautiful, you know, immaculate reality of the films that, you know, they got all the right artists from the you know, books and the illustrators who are famous for it, but they just really, I think they really crushed it when they brought it to life. You're probably right there. I mean, I have to tell you honestly, between the manga at the Mountains of Madness and what I've seen so far of Castlevania, I think that you're probably dead on that. There's a particular style, and it would be interesting to see who they could get to direct that, what anime directors they could get, but I would love to see that. It's actually a really good point. Maybe, though, you know what's interesting? What you can do with video games, I really would love to see. Yeah, right on. I would really love to see a video game animation style of, you know, more of the kind of the cutscenes, although I have to be honest, the gameplay is getting better and better. I would be open to seeing that happen in 3D. I like hand-drawn a lot, and I really do love hand-drawn, you know, anime. But I have to be honest with you, I think it would be really interesting, and especially because you've got so much live action shut down right now. I think it'd be really interesting to see that stylistic for shows, because I really like the video game animation style. I would, with just a couple more things on the figures, I would be absolutely open for watching a Bioshock, you know, animated show. Absolutely would be, you know, an animated kind of horror suspense flick. Not a series, because I think it is such a movie, such a singular movie, but maybe a series of movies, you know, exploring Bioshock Infinite and Bioshock. I could see that 3D animated. I think that could be really great if it was done right. Although, you know, I gotta say, there is something about the point of view aspect of video games that I think could be interesting to explore in cinema. I think it could be an interesting aspect for a video game adaptation. Don't know how it would work narratively, but I think it could be interesting. Maybe that's the next cinematic stylistic. Oh, nice. Yeah, and I think that's probably true for both of you guys, but it's one of the things that's really interesting to me is that all of the people that I know who are creatives and who are artists and are fascinated by fantasy and imaginative fiction and speculative fiction, they always have the widest and most eclectic tastes. When I think about Transformers, Thundercats, the Blade movies, Star Trek, Nightmare on Elm Street, all of those things. I mean, that's a pretty wide interest pool. And I'm the same way. I mean, when I look at the stuff that I have around me, but just the stuff I like in general, there's a very wide pool of it. You know, one of my favorite things I have in this room that is, and I had to save up for it for a really long time, is this, I think it's die-cast metal and a couple of other things, but it's of the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea Nautilus from the Disney film. I think it's one of the best designs ever. Harper Goff designed it. And that's one of the things that really, aesthetically hit me. And I remember that ride at Walt Disney World, Florida. And, it's that Jules Verne, H.P. Lovecraft, Stan Lee, though, Peter David, the comic book writers that I liked. I mean, there's just so many different things I like, and that now includes manga, that now includes anime, that now includes so many things. And I think that's what, I remember thinking about this just the other day. I was talking to my wife, and I go, I think the thing that's interested me so much about YouTube, and what I enjoy so much about being on YouTube, is I haven't felt like it's been easy to meet people with those kinds of wide interests that I used to meet going to the comic book store when I was a kid, or going to conventions back in the day when conventions were kind of new. And I miss that stuff. I really do. Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I loved those. And I also love when you get the Freddy Krueger gear on. That's just awesome. Okay. And I know you know this, and I had a sit down with my wife about it. I felt like I needed to sit her down and explain to her these sad things from youth, or these dreams from youth, I should say. Not really that sad. But that one of the things I loved more than anything were the second horror movie mask that I got that I absolutely fell in love with. First was the Lon Chaney Wolfman done by Don Post Studios. The second thing was the second mask was the cut off at the face Freddy Krueger Don Post mask, but I desperately wanted the mask that went all the way down to the neck and the shoulders, the shirt. I hated the fact that, even though the thing was like a bucket on my head when I got it, I hated the fact that, because I really was into masks and makeup effects and special effects. I was really bummed out about that. So I showed my wife, and I go, compared to some of the masks they have now, I mean, there's even one by, I think, Immortal Masks, which is a silicone-based mask. You put it on, and it's like you're in the makeup. It's fabulously expensive, I'm sure. But the ones done by Trick or Treat Studios and some of those companies. But man, you want to talk about a makeup movie series horror character? I had the glove like about a bunch of other 80s horror fans, and yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street I was obsessed with. There was a group that put on these absolutely extravagant haunted houses in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I grew up, and they had they were just insane. And they had a section on Nightmare on Elm Street in several of their haunted houses. And I just used to go into those haunted houses just hoping there would be a Nightmare on Elm Street section again that year. One time they had a sign that said Elm Street. One time they had him push out of the wall, and they had fabric on the wall, and then had someone else jump out. And I love those movies. I love those posters. I mean, yeah, to answer that question. The other mask I had that I was obsessed with was Jason Voorhees' hockey mask. Loved that design. I mean, those horror characters, and I didn't even really think about it for a while, but I was just obsessed with Freddy and Jason for a huge while there. Just obsessed in my youth. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's more You make me think of all this stuff, and I wish I still had it. So I actually made with my little video camera when I was a kid. I did my own, my own Child's Play movie. So I took a doll and I put, clay on its face, and it couldn't move or anything like that, and I just shot it as best as I could and did a little movie because I was obsessed with Child's Play when I was a kid. Loved that movie too. Those were my three. I wasn't a Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy. I wasn't into that. I wasn't into Hellraiser. I mean, I got it. My studio mate and my buddy's done covers for the Hellraiser books, and he's an amazing artist. But it just wasn't... I didn't glom onto those movies as much as I did Child's Play. And as much... and I loved Tales from the Crypt, the TV series. I loved the puppet from Tales from the Crypt Keeper puppet they did. Was obsessed with that too. So yeah, those were probably... I feel like I'm going to just keep thinking of things if I keep talking about it. But those are things that are hugely influential on that time period of my life. I really think that one thing that manga seems to understand incredibly well is how to effectively do horror as a sequential art genre. There have been some great horror comics, and obviously The Walking Dead proves that it's possible, and certainly in terms of with sales. But I really do think that those old EC comics, some of those Wally Wood horror stories and some of the Bernie Wrights and stuff, I'd love to see those come back. No, I haven't seen it. I have not seen it yet. I'm curious to know what your thoughts are and whether I should see it. I wasn't wild about the change in the face design, to be honest with you. I really like the way that character was designed initially, but I'm open to giving it a chance. It's like with everything. I'm not. How do I word it? I'm not a hard sell when it comes to genre stuff, and it's one of those things to where no matter how annoyed I can get with certain decisions made with genre work, I'm always rooting for it. I'm always rooting for it. I will. If there's and I think maybe Stranger Things and some of those shows and The Witcher benefit from that from me, is because I really do want, I do want people who are passionate about those kinds of stories to do well. Now, when people are cynical about those kinds of stories, I don't need there to be movies of these properties that I grew up with, or I should say, I almost hate referring to them as properties, but of these iconic characters and stories. I don't need to see more movies if they're by people who don't care about them, but I'm always open to an interesting take as long as it's not cynical. Oh, hello! Greetings back to Colombia. Glad to have you with us. Yeah, I mean, I tell you, YouTube is extraordinary. It's so great to get to meet people from all over the place. But yeah, I haven't seen that, and I did watch your kind of scathing review for the remake of the latest Nightmare on Elm Street flick, or the attempt at it. I forget what it was called, but I'm curious if you have a similar take on Chucky or if it's the opposite. That'd be interesting to see. So here's what I've been up to, Colombia. It's good to have you with us. Juan Diego, and I don't think I can get your last two names correct, and I should be able to. So apologies for that, but I'll work on it. I will absolutely work on it. So let's see here. What more do I have to do here? And thank you guys for the likes. I really do appreciate it. It's nice to have found this community, and it's just nice to meet a lot of people who have similar rich interests in all this genre stuff. And like I said, it kind of reminds me of going to conventions when I was a kid. Meeting all the cool people that you meet with different interests and with shared interests. I couldn't ask for much more than that. It's a pretty cool space to be creating on and to be sharing work on. And I benefit so much from YouTube creators sharing, their experiences, and sometimes that's, I've mentioned this to Michael before, and it's true for a lot of the other people I follow on YouTube. which is, whether it's Michael on retro blasting, so a couple of Michaels there, Michael French on retro blasting. It's sometimes it's the background that I put on of people sharing their passions about things that helps me to do this work. And so I've watched, Michael's Blade audio commentary while I've had Blade playing a couple of times while I'm working on this stuff, because it's just a great, it's a really great mood setter for the work I'm doing, and it's nice when you're trying to create stuff that's where you really need to be, in my opinion anyway, or at least I need to be. I'll use an I statement there, where you need to be passionate, or where I need to be. Gosh, I didn't even last very long with that. Where I need to be passionate while I'm doing it. It's really nice to surround yourself and immerse yourself in enthusiastic content and enthusiastic entertainers, and that's the thing for me that becomes really important. And so, yeah, I'm very, very grateful for this community, because, again, it feels like going to the comic shop and shooting the bull with a bunch of people, and that's huge for me. So sometimes I'm watching, Kim Jung-ji, doing comic book work and doing his illustration work, and sometimes I'm watching people talk about toys or figures, the review spot. Oh my gosh. Too kind. Well, guys, as you can probably tell from my my increasingly slurred speech and me forgetting what to say, it is 2:10 here on the East Coast, and I cannot keep my hands steady. And so, Juan, I'm sorry that I'm wrapping up, but I hope you'll go back and watch the rest of the stream. It's good to see you, and it's good to see that Lovecraft on your icon. I do appreciate that, and I do thank you for your support. I thank all of you guys for your support, Kevin and Michael at The Choice Voice. If you haven't subscribed to The Choice Voice and Michael's channel, please do give him a subscribe. I back him on Patreon. I'm a very satisfied patron of his work, and just has terrific takes on things, and always coming from the heart, and always honest. So on that note, gang, I am going to pass out. Thank you so much for checking this stuff out and for sticking with me. And it's always a pleasure, and so completely thankful. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you for your support. All right, guys, take care, everybody. Have a good evening. Stay safe out there. And I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate your support for the book. And I'll see you soon. Take care, Kevin. I'll see you soon, my friend.